In this video, I am going to talk about how to develop our first Hibernate application. The main goal of this application is saving object in the database. What do you mean by saving object? According to OR mapping terminology, saving object means collecting the data of the object and writing to the database table as a record. So my target is what? Inserting record in database table by using Hibernate persistence logic. You know that Hibernate is there to develop objects based persistence logic, which is nothing but OR mapping persistence logic. It internally uses JDBC code plus SQL queries and to complete that requirement. But it provides abstraction layer to programmer on JDBC code and generated SQL queries. That's why we get the feeling, okay, we are working with objects to develop the persistence logic. So save object, saving object, inserting record in DB table by collecting the data of the object. Let's talk about the software setup that I am going to take up. The software setup that I am going to take here is JDK, any version okay, but my Hibernate 5.x is compatible with what? JDK 1.8. That's why I'll go for JDK 1.8. I'm going to use Hibernate 5.x. If I talk very specific, I think I am using I.1.0. Then I got Oracle 11G. Oracle 11G. Here I'm going to use Oracle 11G. So the IDE I'm going to use is Eclipse. Eclipse IDE. So this is our software setup. This is seriously, thoroughly our what? Software setup. In order to develop Hibernate application, you know, like we need to have some resources. Number one, Hibernate configuration file, which contains JDBC driver details and other details to locate and interact with the database software. Then Hibernate mapping file, where we do OR mapping configurations, like mapping class with the table, member variables with the table columns, and many other things we do, identifier field configuration and all this stuff. We need to have one domain class because whose objects will be used to develop the persistence logic. And at the end, we need to develop one application where we really develop the objects based persistence logic. So let's start the work one by one. So my step number one is create DB table in database software. So I have Oracle database software here. In that Oracle database software, so I am going to use describe employee. This is my table. EID, it is having primary key constraint number. First name, last name, email. All these three columns are what? Varchar columns. That means they allows text data and this allows numeric data. Moreover, it is a primary key column. Which primary key column? Singular primary column. Singular primary key column means primary key constraint is applied on only one column of the table. Right. So table is ready. What is our table? Employee. So I have shown there, table is ready. So what are the columns was? EID, number, PK. Next, we have first name, last name, email, all are of what type? Varchar 2. So we are ready with the table. Next, step number 2, create Java project. Right now, my application is standalone application having Hibernate persistence logic to interact with the database software. So to develop this standalone application, definitely we need to work with what? I'm going to take one standalone application. That's why normal Java project is enough. There is no need of having what? Dynamic web project or other special projects. So shall we start creating Java project? Create Java project in Eclipse IDE. and add Hibernate jar files and OJDBC6.jar, because my target database software is Oracle here. To talk with Oracle database software, we need Oracle thin driver, and Oracle thin driver comes in the form of what? OJDBC6.jar file to the build path of the project. So once again, see, I need to create a Java project because my client application that is going to talk with the database software having Hibernate persistence logic is standalone application. That's a normal Java project is enough. And after creating that project, I am going to add Hibernate jars and OJDBC6.jar file to the build path. So I think I have Eclipse Neon is there. Eclipse Neon is there. So here is my Eclipse IDE. So what is the target? Creating Java project and adding what? Jar files to build path. So let me start doing this. New project, Java project. So I'll take my HB pros1. Purpose of the project is what? Saving object. Say next. Then we got save finish. So we are ready with project. In this project we have to add jars. Right click on the project, build path, configure build path, go to libraries tab, add external jars. So this is the zip file extraction. In that lib folder is there. In that lib folder all the jars are there, but actual main jar file is hibernate-core-version.jar. Yeah, if you have a library, as I have talked in other video, you can even add that library also. But let me add that OJDBC6.jar. This is my Oracle. Here OJDBC6.jar is there. Done. Apply. Okay. Now jars are ready. See, all the jars are there, including this OJDBC6.jar. So next, step number 3, develop resources as shown below. HB pros1, there we got src folder. In that src folder, what we got? com.nt.cfgs. Under this CFGs, we got hibernate.cfg.xml file. This is Hibernate configuration file, which contains database details and JDBC driver details to locate and interact with what? Database software. Yes, we got employee.hbm.xml. This is going to be my Hibernate mapping file. Generally, we maintain domain class in a separate package, com.nt.domain. So there we got empdetails.java. Yes, at the end we need to test the application by developing persistence logic. Okay, to develop this persistence logic, I am taking one separate package, com.nt.test. There I will take one class. What is that? Save object to test. Save object to test.java. Fine. What is this file here? Hibernate configuration file. What is this file? Hibernate mapping file, where all configurations will be done. Then so we got something called domain class. So let me change my domain class name. The best practice is table name and domain class name generally matches. That's a good practice. So save object test, client application to database software having HB persistence logic. What logic here? HB persistence logic. Nothing but Hibernate persistence logic. Yeah, that's it. So we have, these are the resources. Generally the recommended naming conventions are this. For configuration file, hibernate.cfg.xml. For mapping file, generally it is one per database table. Table name will be there in the mapping file name. If table name is employee, employee.hbm.xml. Domain class also we generally take on one per table basis, So if table name is employee, and we'll take what? Employee.java as domain class. And as everyone knows, domain class is actually POSO class, an ordinary Java class without any speciality. Moreover, it's a Java bean. Having getter and setter methods. And it's also called domain class or BO class. Why? Because this class will be mapped with a table, and this class properties will be mapped with what? DB table columns. So domain means specific to one database environment, database domain or data model domain. So BO class, business object class, a Java bean, okay, whose object can hold persistable data, or whose object can hold data given by persistence logic, is called as what? BO class. So basically we use this domain class to perform lot of persistence operation. Sometimes the data of this domain class object we save in the table. Sometimes we get the record and we store into this objects of domain class. We do various activities. We do different activities. So overall it will be used to develop what? Objects based persistence logic like anything. So that's why it is called as what? Come on. Domain class, or it is the base class whose objects participates in what? OR mapping persistence logic. What logic here? OR mapping persistence logic. Are you getting my point on it? Yes. So let's go for the real application development. Let's start the development here. Here we have packages. Let me create the package. com.nt.cfgs. That's nice. We have another package. com.nt.domain. Yes. We got one more package. com.nt.test. This is test package. So now we have to develop Hibernate configuration file. So typing XML files is not recommended. Always inspire from example or reference file and modify them as needed. So let's do that. Here we have HBsoft. This is the place where Hibernate software is installed. Here I'll search for it. Hibernate.cfg.xml. Take anything of your choice. Copy it and paste in the project. Yes. Paste here. Yeah. So this is our some configuration file. Let's modify according to our requirement. So we have something called session factory. Fine. So this is a schema statement here. You can continue this one as it is. So session factory, and you know that all these details will be utilized towards creating session factory object. That's why they have given tag called session factory. Here right now I am interested to talk with what? Oracle database software. Oracle.jdbc.driver.oracle driver. Fine. Next URL jdbc : oracle : yes, we have thin here. We have localhost @localhost 1521. Instead of me developing everything from scratch level, I'm just taking one example Hibernate configuration file and I'm modifying as per our application requirement. In this system, Oracle password is system and Oracle username is system, password is what? Manager. That's nice. So right, then So here is the place where you have to write the name of the mapping file, name of the mapping file. So mapping talks about mapping file. So in our application, what is there? com/nt/ cfg/ what is the name of the mapping file was? employee.hbm.xml file. These are technically connection properties, and this is technically, what is this? Mapping file. This is technically called mapping file. So let's summarize what is this. This is header section, don't worry much on it. So it can be either based on DTD or what? XSD. Right now it's a XSD based one. Then these are connection properties, basically JDBC driver details, using which Hibernate framework locates and interacts with the database software. This is name of the mapping file, name of the mapping file. So right. So now we need to develop domain class. We need to develop class. Domain class is a Java bean, also Pozo class, just contains what? Properties which are going to be mapped with the DB table columns along with the getter and setter method. So we decided to take domain class as what? Employee. We decided to take domain class as what? Employee. There. We'll take private int no. If you want, you can match with real properties, boss. What are the columns we got? EID. So I am taking property also EID, and if needed you can take it as a protected, so that you can even use in the subclasses, especially when you want to keep domain classes in the inheritance to make them visible in what? Subclasses. It's a recommendation to take protected also. Fine. What is this? Properties. These properties will be mapped with the DB table columns, right? So private string first name, right? Private string last name, next private string email. So this is a good practice. It's not like that you cannot take other names. Generally mapping file name matches with the table name, domain class name matches with the table name, and domain class properties matches with what? Domain class properties matches with what? DB table columns. So it's basically should be a Java bean. So we must have getter and setter methods. So I am using Eclipse IDE options to generate getter and setter methods dynamically. Generate getter and setter, select all, but I want to get after last property. That's it. Fine. So we are ready with what? Getter and setter methods. Setter and getters. Okay, that's nice. Save it. Now the time has come to go for what? To develop the mapping file. The time has come to go for what? Mapping file. So let's see how to develop the mapping file. So again, as I said to you people, don't develop the XML file, always copy paste and modify as per the need. So here I am just searching for what? employee.hbm.xml. So luckily we got multiple files having the same name. So collect one file, say paste it. employee.hbm.xml, right? So we modify as required. So it is doc type based. If you want, you can make it as a schema based also, that's not an issue. So here we got something called package kind of thing, remove it, and here we have to write something else here. Let's go for our code. And then I'm taking something called class name com.nt.domain.employee. This is my domain class name, and we want to make it, we want to map it, what is that table? What's the table here? Employee. The table we want to take it is what? Employee. So this is going to be table. The attribute is table. See, domain class name is mapped with the table. So let's observe. Here all the properties must be mapped with the table columns. Thing is, one property should be configured as what? Identifier property, identifier field. What is that property? Since table is having singular primary key constraint column, so take that column related property and configure it as what? Singular identity field. And moreover, here column names are matching with what? Property names, domain class property names. So that's why mentioning column names is also what? Optional. If you are interested, you can mention it, but actually optional. If a class name is matching with the table name, mentioning table name is optional in the mapping file. And if property names are matching with what? DB table columns, DB table column, mentioning column names is optional. But in this example, for clarity purpose, I am going to mention it. And one property should be configured as identifier property. Why? Because in every object of domain class, that value is going to become identity value, and based on that value only every domain class object will be identified by Hibernate framework. If table is having singular primary key constraint, that column related property we generally configure as what? Singular identity property. That too by using what tag? ID tag, with the support of what tag? ID tag. So I am coming to this. What is my table? Employee. So what is the column on which primary key constraint is there? EID is the column on which primary, not null means indirectly talks about what? Primary key constraint. So what is the property that is going to be mapped with what? EID column, EID property. So I am going to configure that property as what? Singular identifier property. So ID name, EID. Column is equal to, is not case sensitive. Okay, remaining properties you can configure normally. Normally to map properties with the columns we use property tag. But to make that property as identifier property along with regular mapping, we take the support of what? ID tag. So let's see. Property name is equal to first name. Column is equal to first name. Column is equal to first name. So similarly, we do it for another two properties. Say paste. Here we have what property here? Last name. What's the column? Last name. And we have what property? Email. And where is the column? Email. Observe in the XML file. This is header section, can be on schema based or XSD base. Fine. Here class is mapped with what? Table. Property is mapped with column, but that column is what? Primary key constraint column. That's why the column related property is configured as what? Identifier property. And remaining properties are mapped with remaining columns. So that's it. So basic resources are ready. Again observe, using configuration file, Hibernate framework locates the destination database software. Using mapping file, all var mapping configuration takes place. And employee.java is the domain class. This is the real class whose objects will be used by our application, client application, to develop what? Objects based persistence logic. Now what is left? Client application development that wants to develop Hibernate persistence logic. Hibernate persistence logic based on what? Objects. So where we use a little bit of Hibernate API and domain class objects. What is our basic requirement in this application here? Saving object. Saving object means capturing the data of the domain class object and writing it to table as a record. Writing it to table as a record. So observe, we are object oriented programmers and we would like to do everything through objects, and Hibernate is allowing me to do that. See, I am going to write objects based persistence logic by using objects without using any JDBC code, without using any insert SQL query. I am going to perform record insertion on the table. That means I am going to use objects directly in the persistence logic development. What is the class? Save object to test. This is my main method, right? So here is what? Activate Hibernate framework. Activate Hibernate framework, also called what? Bootstrap. Bootstrap Hibernate. So a good practice is don't declare the local variables of the method in the middle of the method definition. Declare all the variables at the top of the method definition. What's the advantage? You need not to worry about the scope of the variable within the method. All variables are visible throughout the method, number one. And we'll be having clarity. What is the variable? Okay, all variables will be there at one place. It looks very nice. So that's why I'm going to take, we know that in another video I talked about 3 important objects of Hibernate programming. So configuration object, session factory object, session object. Yes, first let me keep these 3 objects ready. So if you want more information about these 3 objects, please refer my other video where I talked about 3 important objects of Hibernate programming. So that's why here my basic target is what? Saving the object. So you want more information about these 3 objects, please refer my other video where I talked about these objects. So here what? Configuration CFC is equal to null. Control plus shift plus O to get the package imports. Yeah. CFZ is equal to new configuration of. CFZ is equal to new configuration of. Definitely it activates Hibernate framework. That's nice. So read both mapping comma configuration files data. So what is this? CFZ is equal to CFZ dot configure. CFZ dot configure. Yeah, you have to specify the location. com/nt/cfz/ come on, hibernate dot cfz dot xml. Right, it locates both XML files here, loads them, checks whether they are well formatted, checks whether they are valid or not. If yes, it internally prepares what? In-memory metadata having both XML files and returns configuration object representing that in-memory metadata. Next, build session factory. Build session factory object. Right, I will take session factory is equal to session factory is equal to null. Control plus shift plus O. Fine. Here what is that? Factory is equal to CFZ dot. What's the method we got? Yes, we got a method called build session factory. Next, open session with database software. So session factory basic work is acting as a factory to create the session object, and it gathers entire data that is there in configuration object and dumps into what? Session factory object. It acts as a factory to create what? Session object. Okay, fine. Open session with database software. right. Then what is this? Session SCS is equal to what? Null. Control plus shift plus O. Yes. SCS is equal to, tell me, factory dot open session. Factory dot open session. Yes, we are ready with what? All the three objects. We are ready with what? All the three objects. These are the three important objects that we are ready with. What are those? Configuration object, which activates Hibernate framework, and also what? Reads both XML files data and maintains in-memory metadata. Session factory object, which is created based on configuration object and acts as a factory to create session object. Session object that opens session or connection with the database software through Hibernate framework and provides base for the programmer, to perform persistence operations. So now my requirement is, I want to save the object. First of all, object should be there or not there? Yes. So let me create the object for domain class. I am going to create object for employee class. Employee emp is equal to what? Null. Control plus shift plus O. emp is equal to new employee of. Yes. Here I am going to set the data. emp dot set eid 1001. emp dot set first name. So we'll take some Raja. So emp dot set last name, some Donald. Fine. So emp dot set some email. What is that? Raja at gmail.com. Raja at what? gmail.com. It's some dummy data here. It's like whatever data you want, you can take it. So we are ready with the object. Now we have to save the object. In Hibernate, all non-select persistence operations should be done in a transaction environment. Transaction is a unit of work that can be done or undone, that can be committed or that can be rolled back. No off works, either do it completely or don't do it anything. So committing means do completely, roll back means don't do anything. So transaction is a unit of work that can be committed or what? Rolled back. All non-select operations in Hibernate must be executed as what? Transactional statement. For select operation, this problem is not there. This is required only for what? Non-select operation. Why? Because non-select operation changes the data of the database. They modify the data of the database. So that's why by using commit rollback kind of activities, we are either committing the changes permanently or we are undoing the changes. That's why there is a provision in Hibernate. Okay, so to commit or roll back our persistence activity. So for that reason, all non-select persistence operations in Hibernate must be executed in a transaction environment. So fine. In JDBC, all persistence operation takes place in database software by enabling auto commit mode on database software. But when it comes to Hibernate, that control will be given to the application. So it's up to the application to decide whether the data that is gone to database software should be committed or what? Rolled back. So for that purpose, what I do, so I'll take a try block, because if everything goes smooth, I will go for commit. If some exception rises, I will try to roll back. So here I will take transaction tx is equal to null. Transaction tx is equal to null. Fine. So choose carefully. You choose Hibernate transaction. So here what we got, tx is equal to session dot begin transaction. Okay, nice. So here we have save method, directly save method, which takes what? domain class object. What is our domain class object? EMP. Fine. So here I am simply saying what? Commit. If everything goes smoothly, I am committing the transaction. So here I will write sysout. What is this? Object is saved. Public record is inserted. Here is my try block. Here is my catch block. What is that? Exception E. If anything goes wrong, let me roll back the transaction. I will roll back the transaction. A good programmer closes the session and session factory objects at the end. First to close the session, then close the session factory. When you close the session, it will close the connection with the database software. When you close the factory, it will destroy all the resources that are associated with what? Session factory. In fact, the entire data that is there in the form of the entire in-memory metadata that came and stored into session factory object will be destroyed. So please refer my other video to get more information about what? These three objects. End of what? Main method. End of what? Class. Once again look at the code. This one activates Hibernate framework by using the jar file that are added to what? Build path. And this one reads both XML files data, checks whether they are well formed or not, valid or not, and prepares in-memory metadata and returns configuration object representing that in-memory metadata. This line takes the data that is represented by a configuration object and creates a session factory object dumping that data, and it's an immutable object. Once data is set, we cannot modify. It's basically factory to create session object. That's why we are using session factory to open to create session object which opens connection with the database software. So its basic requirement is saving object. That's why I kept one domain class object ready with the data. And you know that all non-select operations should be executed as what? Transactional statement. So transaction basically deals with three things. Begin transaction, start the work, which internally calls con.set auto commit false method using JDBC support. Then continue work, complete your persistence activity. Right now my work is what? Saving the object. That's why I called session.save method. This save method takes a given domain class object, passes to Hibernate, and Hibernate becomes ready to collect the object data and to insert the record into the table. So tx.commit. So we are requesting Hibernate, if everything goes smoothly, whatever persistence activity it asked it to do should be completed and should be committed in the database software. If anything goes smoothly wrong, control comes to catch block. In the catch block, we are rollbacking this one. So before executing this application, let me check the table. Select star from employee. There are no records. That's cool. So now my development is over. So can I go for next step? Step number 4. Run the client application. We have to run the client application. It's a standalone application having main method. I can happily run as a normal. There's no need of server and all this stuff. So you can run very normally. So here is the run button. Let me run my application. So here are my log messages here, and I am getting a message called object is saved or record is what? Inserted. Let's go there and see the table. My data is inserted or not? Yes. But one small thing here. There is a possibility of getting exceptions because still Hibernate framework is not that much comfortable with what? XSD statement in the configuration file and mapping file. So if you have placed XSD statement at the top of Hibernate configuration file or mapping file, please replace them with what? DTD statement. Doc type talks about DTD. Okay, if other things are there, that talks about XSD. So generally you will see lot of XSD files. Okay, if XSD is used. Right now there is no proper support for what? XSD statements based XML files in Hibernate 4.x and 5.x. So I suggest you people, I recommend you people to change that one to what? Doc type based DTD statement. So what does it mean? We are simply informing Hibernate, we are developing a whole XML document based on the rules and guidelines that are there in this DTD file. Similarly, in the mapping file, we are mentioning one more DTD file indicating we have developed our entire mapping file based on what? Rules and guidelines that are there in this DTD file. So there is no proper support for XSD file. So in the beginning you might have noticed I have taken this configuration file based on XSD. So since I realized they are not working properly, now I change it back to what? Doc type. Doc type means DTD based documents I created. So observe very carefully, we are object oriented programmer, we would like to work with objects. In fact, we would like to work with objects in persistence operations also. Happily we are using what? Objects for persistence operation and completing those activities. Simply what? Completing those activities. So this is how we have to think about what? Working with objects or saving the objects. See, no JDBC code, no SQL queries, and as an object oriented programmer we can happily do everything through what? Objects. So this is about various steps that are involved to develop what? First application of the Hibernate. So you can send your queries. You can send your queries to my email account. This is my email account. You can send your queries to email account. Thank you.